everyone, this is MusicTechHelpGuy, and today I'm doing a demonstration and review of the Monogram Creative Console modular MIDI controller. These are fully modular MIDI controllers that can be connected together magnetically in just about any configuration you like. Because it's just MIDI messages, they'll work with pretty much any DAW, including Logic Pro, as well as video and photo editing applications. I've been using the Creative Console for about a month now, and while I love playing and recording with my keyboard controller and beat pad controllers, I find that a lot of the time I just want to have some creative controls in front of me for modulation effects, transport controls, and writing and automation. If you're interested in getting the Creative Console yourself, Monogram has partnered with me to give my viewers a 20% discount off the purchase of any Monogram products for the next 30 days. Just use the code MTHG20 at checkout. I've left links in the video description below if you want to check them out. This is a pretty long video because there's a lot you can do with the Creative Console, so I've separated the video into different chapters below for ease of navigation. So let's get right into this. For this review, Monogram sent me two products. The Creative Console Studio, which comes with 5 modules, the Monogram Core, which is the main brain module that hooks up to USB and powers the entire unit, the Orbiter module, which has a pressure-sensitive disc for XY controls, as well as an encoder ring, which is fantastic for scrubbing through or navigating through your projects, the Essential Keys module, which has 3 mechanical switches, and each switch actually has 2 actions, a short press and a long press, and then 2 dial modules, which contain 3 high-resolution rotary encoders each. Each dial has 3 actions. You can turn the dial, press and turn the dial, and then press to reset the dial. And then they also sent me a slider module, which has 3 sliders. Now just keep in mind, all of these modules require the Monogram Core module. So while you can buy any of these modules alone as an add-on, they have to be hooked up to the Monogram Core for power and to send MIDI signal over USB to your computer. Next, let's talk about the setup. Unfortunately, this is not one of those MIDI controllers where you can just plug and play. It requires some manual setup because it's a fully customizable unit. First, set up your console the way you want it. I'm using this configuration, but you can create just about any configuration you like. Each module other than the core module will have a set of these pins. This is where the module receives power and sends signal. So you can chain these in a serial fashion and power all of your modules in your own custom setup. Once you've got your configuration set up, download and install the Monogram Creator application. The first time you open the app, you can register your Creative Console and they'll give you a quick walkthrough of how the process works. Eventually, you'll be taken to a page where you can create a custom profile for your configuration. So I'll choose Logic for this. And then you can double click up here and give this a custom name. I'll call this Logic MIDI. Now, if I click on any of the controls in my configuration, you'll get a settings window. And some of these have macOS system controls. For example, if I wanted to assign the system brightness to this knob, and I could control the brightness of my display. And to remove a control, simply click on the control and then click Clear. To use these with MIDI, you have to select Customize and then use the MIDI mode. And then I can set each controller to a different CC number. CC stands for continuous controller, and each continuous controller has an assignment number between 0 and 127. So what I'm going to do is start at CC number 20. So this will be 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. The pressure disc XY control will be 29 and 30, and the encoder ring will be CC 31. And I'll explain why I'm starting on CC20 in just a bit. It'll all make sense later. So with my first slider selected, I can choose CC, and then I can choose what CC number. So I'll just type in 20, and then I'll click Done. So that's assigned to CC20. Then I can click on the next one, go to Customize, go to MIDI mode, and then type in 21. Now this may seem like a lot of work up front just to set up a MIDI controller, but the good thing about this is once you do this once, you'll never have to do it again because you can save this as a custom profile that you can recall at any time. In fact, you can create multiple profiles for different editing tasks or for different applications. Now, when you get to the rotary encoders, you'll see that there's an additional option here, absolute and relative. For encoders, make sure this is on absolute for pretty much all musical functions or modulation functions. The absolute mode is the way to go. You'll thank me later. Okay, so off screen, I mapped all of my CCs to my sliders and my rotary knobs. Next, let's map the orbiter module. So when you click on this and you go to customize, I'll go to MIDI mode, you'll see there's three options. Turn, which is the encoder wheel. Tilt, which is, I believe this is the left-right movement axis. And then up-down is the y-axis. So I'll assign turn to CC 31, and then I'll make X 30, and then I'll make Y 31. And then if I go back to turn, let's put this on absolute mode as well, because the ring encoder functions the same way as the rotary encoders. So 31 for turn, 30 for tilt X, and 30, whoop, I made a mistake. It's supposed to be 29 for Y tilt. So 31, 30, and 29. Now I'll come back to the core module and the essential keys in just a bit. For now, let's play around with some of these CCs. Okay, so now let's try to map some of these CCs in Logic. Now, if I change the LCD display at the top to custom, you can use this no in, no out area. This is your MIDI monitor area to verify that the CC numbers are what they're supposed to be. So the first slider, as you can see, is CC20. So that information just means channel 1. The second number is CC number 20. And then the last number is the range of the CC. So all the way down is 0, all the way up is 127. So you have 20, 21, 22, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 31. And then the pressure disc is 29 and 30 for my XY controls. Now, if I want to map some of these controls to an instrument in Logic, the most common way to do this is to bring up the controller assignments window. You can bring this up by pressing Shift-Option-K. Then what you do is you just click Learn Mode at the bottom. Let's see if I can learn the cutoff knob here to my first rotary encoder. Okay, so it's learned it, but what you'll notice here is this value, this min-max value says 2726. What that means is it's only using a range of 1 for the full 0 to 127 range. This is not Monogram's fault. This is a Logic thing. I'm not really sure why this happens. It happens on my Novation keyboard as well, and it only happens in Logic, so I'm not exactly sure why that happens, but if you just simply change the minimum and maximum value to 0 to 127, you shouldn't have that problem anymore. Now you can see when I turn the encoder that the full range of the knob can be accessed. So let's say I want to blend the filter here, like 50-50. We'll make filter 1 a peak filter. And let's learn all 6 of these controls to my 6 rotary encoders. So again, just learn mode, click on the resonance, move the knob, click on the next one, move the knob, click on this cutoff up here, move the knob, and then just continue that process until all 6 controls have been learned, and then turn off learn mode. And it looks like I'm not having that 0 to 127 min-max issue like I was having before. So let's see what we can do with this. I think my reverb's a little heavy there. Let me just go ahead and pull that down a bit. And let's say that I want to control some of these plugin controls as well. I can do that as well. So maybe I'll control the mix with my first slider, and then I'll control the filter blend with my second slider, and then my third slider I'll use for just the volume control of the synth. So I'll go ahead and press Shift-Option-K again, and then I'll just learn all of these parameters. So learn mode, click on mix, move the slider. Once again, you got to set that 0 to 127 range. There we go. And then we'll learn the blend knob as well. That will be learned. Oh, I got to turn learn mode back on. So click on the blend mode, move that slider, and then we'll control volume as well. And there we go. So now I have all 6 of these filter controls, plus the reverb, plus the filter blend, plus the volume of the instrument. So that's just basic CC mapping and logic, fairly straightforward. You just have to set what CCs you want to use. So let's talk about why I started on CC 20. If I go into my automation here, just press A, and then change this from track automation to region automation, I can go down to MIDI controls, and these are your continuous controllers. The reason why I started at number 20 is numbers 20 through 31 are sort of set aside as just general purpose controllers, as are 16 through 19. They're not pre-assigned to anything. In some synthesizers, CCs 0 through 19 can be pre-assigned to things. In particular, the modulation wheel, sometimes the breath controller, sometimes the foot controller, the volume, the expression pedal. So sometimes these things are pre-assigned in certain synthesizers. But if you jump down to 20, you have 12 controls here that you can access. And if you max out these controls, if you go down to 64 through 127, once again, there's a lot of these that are pre-assigned. And just because these have labels doesn't necessarily that they're always going to be used or pre-assigned, but sustain pedal, CC64, is one you definitely don't want to use twice. But if you go down to the bottom here, you'll see 102 through 119 are all available as well. So that's my reasoning behind starting on number 20 instead of starting on number 1 or number 0. Another thing I like to do if I want a certain knob or fader to only go up to a certain position or down to a certain position, like the volume control, for example, I don't really want it to go any louder than about halfway because that's going to make it clip. And things like resonance controls, you know, in the higher settings, these can get really screechy sounding. So you may want to cut them about maybe 2/3 or 75%. Same thing with the FM knob. I may not want too much of that drive and distortion on the FM knob and the drive knob. So what you can do is you just use Logic's controller assignment window to set a minimum and maximum range for these sliders. So for like drive and FM, for example, maybe I want these just to go to 90. So I'll set that 0 to 90, and then I'll go to FM. There it is. And I'll make this 90 as well. And now when I turn these knobs, you'll see they only go all the way down, all the way up to about 2/3 of the way. So I've limited them with that upper number. And you can also limit things with the lower number. You know, for example, I don't want my cutoff frequencies to be all the way, well, I don't want the low pass all the way down because that'll just completely cut out the signal. So maybe what I'll do for the cutoff is I'll set a low range of 30. So now when I roll this all the way up, it can go all the way up. And when I roll it all the way down, it only goes to about 75% down or 25% up. Now, when you've customized all your controls and you're ready to record, it's very simple. Just press A to show your automation. Change your automation mode from read over to touch or latch to one of the live modes. I'll set this to latch because I want the controllers to stay where they are after I release the control. And with all of these CCs mapped, I can write an automation for all of these parameters all at once. So you can see every single CC here is assigned to a different automation lane. So this is really great for creative sound design. Although I probably won't use 9 controls all at once, this is more of just a proof of concept. For the pressure disc on the orbiter module, this is just 2 CC controls, one for the X-axis, which is left and right, and one for the Y-axis, which is up and down. One of my favorite ways to use this is as an XY pad controller for the transform pad in Alchemy, albeit it's a little tricky to set up. So with the controller assignments window pulled up, I'll click Learn Mode. I'll move this around and I'll look for it to be on transform pad Y. So it's assigned to transform pad Y. What I need to do is press the top or bottom of the pressure disc. Next, I'll turn off Learn Mode, I'll turn it back on, and then move this around until I get the X parameter. YX. So there's the X parameter. And you'll see as you move it, you'll get different selections. It's kind of random, so I just kind of move it around until I get the parameter that I want. So transform pad X. This time I want to press the left or right side of the pressure disc. Just press it once because it'll work out better that way. If you fool around with it while you're trying to learn it, the controller won't work right. So turn off Learn Mode. I'll make sure both of these have a min-max value set to 0 to 127, but it looks like we are good to go. So now left and right moves the transform pad left and right, and up and down moves the transform pad up and down. The only thing that's tricky about this XY pad is because the pressure disc always returns to center, the position of the XY will also return to center. So when using this, you have to sort of make sure that these 4 pads are the ones that you want to return to when you release the control. Another way to set this up would be to make the Y-axis, the up and down, we could make this pitch bend. So you just change it over to pitch bend. The X pad, we can just keep on CC30. We'll assign it to something else. And then turn the wheel. So I'll set this to CC1, which is the default position or the default assignment for modulation wheel. Okay, so off screen, what I did was I assigned the modulation wheel to cutoff 2 in the ES2. So that's going to be the encoder ring. And then up and down is pitch bend. I've set the pitch bend to 1 octave here. And then left and right is resonance mapped to control A, which control A has been mapped to CC30. So now I've got 3 modulation sources here on this single module. Now, if you're working with the new spatial audio tools in Logic 10.7, you might think that the orbiter module is perfect for surround panning. Now, it does have some functionality that's quite useful for surround panners and 3D objects, but you can't really use the pressure disc for any of these controls because when you let go of the pressure disc, it returns to center. So it's always going to return to its default value when you let go. However, the encoder ring is quite helpful for positioning your surround panners in 3D objects. So let me show you how to set that up. I've got it reassigned as CC31 again. So I'll just pull up my controller assignments window, turn on Learn Mode, click on the angle function here, and then move the encoder ring. Make sure the min-max is set to 0 to 127, and I'm good to go. So now I can use my encoder ring to position this track anywhere in the surround field. Now, you might think, well, what's the point of just controlling one panner? Well, this will actually control whatever panner you have selected. So whatever track you have selected, it will control that panner. So if I move over to another track here, open up its surround panner, now it'll control that one. So this can sort of be a global control that you just leave here, and you can use it for any of these panners. Let's try switching this over to a 3D object panner, and let's see if that controls that. So it's not going to, it's one or the other. You don't have simultaneous control of 3D object panners and surround panners because the angle and the left-right are 2 different controls. Now, if you had 2 orbiters, you could assign both of these controls at the same time, And you could have one for 3D object panners, one for surround panner. So what I've done here is I've assigned the left-right control to the encoder ring and the back-front elevation and spread controls to my 3 sliders. What I prefer using the encoder ring for is for navigation through my session. So let me just start from scratch here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this to the playhead position, essentially. So this is a little different control. It's a global control. It's not a MIDI control. So what you do is you click Learn Mode, you move the encoder, but you're not going to click on anything to learn a parameter. You actually have to set this up manually. So what you do is, 1, make sure your min-max is set to 0 to 127. And then up at the top here, where it says Class Key Command, change this from Key Command over to Global. And by default, the first parameter that shows up is playhead, and part is bar. So I'm just going to leave these as is. Again, make sure min-max is set to 0 to 127. And now I should be able to use this to sort of scrub through my project. Now, this is a really short project right now, but if you have a full song, imagine being able to use the encoder wheel to just very quickly scrub through any point in the song. Next, let's talk about the Essential Keys module. Here we have 3 buttons that can be used as CC switches. They can trigger notes, or they can trigger your favorite shortcuts and key commands. So if I click on the bottom key here, you'll see presets for macOS and profile mode. We'll come back to these in just a bit. If you click Customize, there's macOS mode, keyboard mode, where you can save shortcuts, and MIDI mode. Now, in MIDI mode, you can assign these to CCs, so you could use this as a switch controller if need be. You can also use this to trigger notes. In note mode, you just choose what pitch you want each key to be, and then you set the octave and channel. I have plenty of beatpad controllers, so I don't need any more note entry methods. So I'm going to go up to keyboard mode, and I'm going to save these as my 3 most common MIDI shortcuts that I use when I'm writing and producing. Well, if I go back to Logic, the 2 that I use all the time, if I just right-click here, are Create MIDI Region and Create Pattern Region. Now, I've pre-assigned these with shortcuts Option-Shift-Command-M and Option-Shift-Command-P. These do not come with shortcuts on them by default. To add those as shortcuts, go up to Logic Pro, Key Commands, Edit, and then search up the key command you're trying to learn. Here I've searched up Create MIDI Region, and it's brought up that parameter. Then you just click Learn by Key Label, and then type in the key command. Likewise, I could type in Create Pattern Region, and here's that function with the learned key command. So that's how I assign those. The other one I use a lot is Convert to MIDI Region. This one does have a pre-assigned key command. It's Control-Option-Command-M. So I'll just click on that button. I'll go to Customize. I'll go to Keyboard Mode, and then I'll just type in the key command here. So Shift-Option-Command-M. And then just repeat that process for any other shortcuts that you want to save to the essential keys. So now, if I want to create a new MIDI region, I just set the playhead where I want it to go. Press that top button to create a new MIDI region. I can do the same thing for pattern regions. And if I want to convert any pattern regions or drummer regions over to MIDI, just select the regions and press the bottom button, and it automatically converts all of those to MIDI regions. So this is a huge time saver for me. Now, the core module also has 2 buttons of its own. These are essentially identical to the Essential Keys module. They're just smaller buttons. Often I'll set these to save and undo, just to have a quick save and undo control there. But if you're using multiple profiles, these are really helpful to be able to switch between your different profiles. So for example, if I created another profile and I made this for Logic Pro, I'll call this, Logic Editing. And then maybe I make a third profile for editing video in Premiere. So now I have 3 profiles I've created. And if I want an easy way to switch between these, I can use the core module for this. The only thing that's tricky is you have to set up these buttons in each of the profiles. For example, if I switch from Logic MIDI over to Logic Editing and nothing has been assigned here, you're not going to be able to do anything with these switches. So I'll set up the top one under Profile mode to go to Next Profile. And then I'll set up the bottom one to go to the previous profile. And then you just have to repeat that for all of your profiles. So now using these 2 buttons, I can cycle through my different profiles. And it tells you right there on the screen when you've switched to a new profile and what the name of that profile is. So again, previous profile, back to Premiere, back to Logic Editing, back to Logic MIDI. Now, because I'm not using multiple profiles here, I think what I'll do is I'll set up the top button as just Command S for save. And then I'll set up the bottom button for Command Z to undo. And now you can see I have my entire configuration for my Monogram Creative Console mapped to different controls. Okay, so now that I've shown you how to use the Creative Console, let's talk about the positives and negatives. Let's start with the positives. This is hands down the most creative MIDI controller I've ever owned. Now that I've had it for a month, I can't imagine working without it. It's incredibly versatile, and being able to customize it for any application and even different profiles for the same application is fantastic. I think people who perform electronic music live will especially love this for customizing their live setup. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, many of the controls have multiple functions built into them. The rotary knobs can be turned, pressed and turned, or just pressed. The essential keys can be short pressed or long pressed. And for shortcuts, you can actually save multiple key commands on a single button in a complex key command chain. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to do a bonus video on creating key command macros. So while my review of this product is overwhelmingly positive, there are a few negatives, and these will vary from person to person. First, I wish there were more pins on the modules, or even just instead of using gendered pins, make the contact points universal. While you can create just about any configuration you like, sometimes there are configurations that are just not possible because of where the pins are located. This is a minor thing, but it's worth mentioning. My main negative point that bothers me the most is that the control assignments are not loaded directly to the console. So the Monogram Creator app has to be open in order for the MIDI controller to work. If you don't have the Creator app open, the controls will do nothing in your DAW. However, if you're going back and forth between different computers, you can always save your profiles and then load them on any other computer you like. Another negative point that isn't an issue for me personally, but I can see some people getting hung up on this, is the setup. It's not a plug-and-play MIDI controller. This is not a beginner's toy. This is a serious music creation tool. So I think most people who are pretty deep into electronic music already are just going to accept the setup time. But like I said, you set it up once, save the profile, and you never have to set it up again. There's even a whole community of people who have shared their profiles for Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, and other DAWs and other applications. I've even shared my own Logic MIDI profile that I used in this video. I'll leave a link to that below if you want to download my MIDI profile and skip all the setup work. So that's the Monogram Creative Console modular MIDI controller. If you're interested in purchasing any Monogram products, head over to monogramcc.com and use the discount code MTHG20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order for the next 30 days. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.